possums. My name is Dr. Aavid Dattenborough. You might remember me from such trustworthy publications as The Minoans Explained and Sweatshops Monthly. The Armana period in ancient Egypt was certainly very titillating, but to understand it, you have to understand its context. The year was 1353 BCE. I was only a young child at the time, and the Egyptian Empire was undergoing a golden age of wealth and power, right in the middle of the 18th dynasty. However, things were soon to get topsy-turvy. With the death of the Pharaoh Amenhotep III, the next Pharaoh Amenhotep IV ascended to the throne in early 1355 BC. Amenhotep IV may be better known as the father of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, his youngest son. Anyway, from what we can gather, Amenhotep IV, in his first year as ruler of Egypt, also called the first regnal year, changed his name to Akhenaten, which means servant of the Aten, and changed his religious and economic capital of the country from Thebes to a city which he established himself, seemingly in the middle of the desert, called Akhetaten, which means horizon of the orb. Now, you may ask, why did he change the religion of such a young-held culture? What did he change it to? Why did he change the capital? Well, hold your horses, cow people. I'm getting there. The Armana period is the term used to describe the period of time in which Pharaoh Amenhotep IV, or Akhenaten, as I will refer to him, ruled Egypt. With this period came untold changes to Egyptian religion, art, and topography. Armana wall art is characterized by a sense of movement and activity in images, with figures having raised heads, many figures overlapping, and many scenes busy and crowded. Also, the human body is portrayed differently in Armana-style artwork than Egyptian art on the whole. For instance, many depictions of Akhenaten's body give him distinctly feminine qualities, such as large hips, prominent breasts, and a larger stomach and thighs. How about that? This is a distinct divergence from the earlier Egyptian art, which shows men with perfectly chiseled bodies. Faces are still shown exclusively in profile. Figures are now shown with both a left and a right foot, contrasting the tradition of being shown with either two left or two right feet. Sculptures from the Armana period are also set apart from other periods of Egyptian art. One reason is the accentuation of certain features. For instance, an elongation and narrowing of the neck, sloping of the forehead and nose, prominent chin, large ears and lips, spindle-like arms, calves and large thighs, stomachs and hips. In one sculpture of Akhenaten, he has wide hips and a drooping stomach. His lips are thick and his arms and legs are thin and lack muscular tone. Some scholars think Akhenaten suffered from a genetic disorder to cause his body to look that way. It should also be noted that he looks a lot like President Obama. Aside from art, the Egyptian religion was changed from a worship of a jumble of deities such as Isis, Thoth, Osiris, and the central god, Amun, to the worship of one god and one god only. This is known as the change from a polytheistic religion to a monotheistic patriarchal religion. Worship places and temples were all converted to the worship of one god, the Aten, a type of sun disk who was father of all. Amenhotep then proceeded to rename himself as Pharaoh Akhetatens, which means servant of the Aten. He then went on to rename his children, among them the young Tutankhaten, which means living image of the Aten, who would later rise to the position of Pharaoh under the name Tutankhamun. Akhenaten then took the drastic measures of stripping the ancient and respected Thebes of its title as capital of Egypt, and relocated the capital to a city he was soon to establish, seemingly in the middle of nowhere, called Akhetaten, the name of which has been interpreted to mean both horizon of the Aten and eclipse of the Aten. Since all cities in Egypt follow the Nile, choosing to have a city in the middle of the desert is certainly an odd decision to make. Many Egyptologists and scholars have debated over why all of these changes took place. But I am not most Egyptologists, and I believe that at the root of all of this ruckus is distrust and an eclipse. Although ancient Egyptians made records of solar eclipses, most of these accounts were stored on papyrus, and as such have not survived until modern day. Now, I am no mathematician, but if we take a look at the simple formula for the constant deceleration model of the Earth, delta t equals 30.65 times beta t squared to the power of s, you will find theoretical mathematical proof that, in 1351, Egypt did experience a solar eclipse of biblical proportions. Cross-referencing this with information from Akhenaten's reign, you will find that this eclipse would have occurred in the 4th year of his reign, 1351 BC, the same year Akhetaten was built, and the cult of the Aten was introduced. So, it can be theorized that during regnal year 4 of Amenhotep IV's reign, he would have experienced a shock of epic proportions, probably in the form of a solar eclipse. Surviving Hittite letters of the time accuse the priests of Osiris and Amun of decadence and failure, and the pharaoh certainly would have known of this. When he cited the solar phenomenon, probably from Thebes, he could have interpreted it as a sign from the Aten, the sun disk god, which had already been established as a god in small, outlandish cults. Some other interesting points linking the pharaoh to an eclipse come by examining Armana art. In the art of Armana, the Aten is represented as a red raying sun disk. This red raying may be a depiction of the chromosphere, which is only visible during total solar eclipses. Other evidence comes in the form of a damaged column marking the boundary of Akhetaten, Akhenaten's holy city. The paragraph is much damaged and rather obscure, but some of the word meanings suggested by scholars include cover, hide, take away, and cut off. Perhaps this is referring to an eclipse. Unfinished funerary art in the tomb of the great seer of the Aten, Mari I, depict a half-covered red-raying Aten, which may portray the shadow bands of an eclipse, which appear just before the totality. Now that we've had a brief look at the inspiration behind Akhenaten's religious change, perhaps we should look at the site of his capital city, Akhetaten. Akhetaten was the name of the city that Pharaoh Akhetatens built in reverence to his newly established god. Traditionally, Egyptian cities were built on the banks of the lifeblood of Egypt, the Nile, but Akhenaten built his city in the middle of the desert. The random whim of a pharaoh? I think not. Akhetaten was built very precisely, and the entire city boundary was marked by a series of columns called stellae. On boundary stele H is recorded a speech by the pharaoh, known as the earlier proclamation. It states, "No, it is the orb, my father, who advised me concerning it, namely the horizon of the orb." The orb is a reference to the sun. Akhenaten says that he was advised by the sun, and the sun alone, in choosing the site of his city, and that the sun showed him this through the horizon of the orb. The Egyptian hieroglyph is this, known as the Akhet. It is a depiction of the orb of the sun passing through between two steep cliffs. In effect, this hieroglyph is a horizon of the orb. Akhetaten is bordered to the east by steep cliff faces of uniform height. Almost at the midpoint of the city, the cliffs are interrupted by a gap, named the Wadi Abu Hassan el-Bari. Every morning when the sun rises from the east, it comes between these two cliff faces, forming a large, natural horizon of the orb. This proves that Akhenaten may have had chosen this site for his new capital based on instruction from his father, the orb, in the form of a natural representation of the holy Akhet. Akhenaten was a truly mysterious and riveting character. People have theorized he was a child molester, Ethiopian, and even a woman. What we do know, however, is that he took a long-held set of beliefs and shredded them, moved the capital city, and did many odd things with his reign, most probably after inspiration from a spectacular solar eclipse. I've given you the facts, now it's time to compute. This is Aavid Dattenborough, signing off. Bye-bye, possums.